Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining another cast webinar. It's really good to see many familiar names here. This one is a special webinar for us as it is the first one of its kind. And in this webinar, the content is driven by you and the questions that you've previously submitted. To answer your questions today, we have the one and only Dany Tancou. So some of you might already know Dany. He's the head of tech support here at Cast. And for those of you who don't, Dany is a well-respected member of the Cast team. He enjoys sharing his vast wysiwyg and CAD knowledge with users through usually the Cast forum, where he's very active, emails, and as well as writing technical articles for us. And his background is in the lighting industry with a passion for 3D modeling and animation. That makes him a reliable source for information, support, as well as inspiration. As this is the first webinar of its kind and the number of questions that we received were quite reasonable, I think we can answer them all, if not hopefully 90%. It was decided that we will try to go through as many questions as possible. So there is a possibility we might go a bit longer than 1 hour, hopefully to take a few live questions in the end as well. And even though this is an open mic webinar, we will mute our mics while then we go through all the answers. And hopefully at the end we can take some of your questions. All right. So you know what? Actually, feel free to submit your questions via chat. On this end, it's myself, Igor, I'm the marketing manager. We have Dino Maza, who is the product manager, and we have Nicholas Lau, Nicola is a training and product support specialist here at Cast. So the three of us will be watching the questions as they come, and we might pre-select a few so we can read them at the end. All right. As usual, the webinar will be recorded, so if we go a bit too fast, later you'll be able to replay the explanations at your own time, your own pace, so don't worry. And I don't want to take much time here, so I introduce you, Dany Tancou.
Hi everyone, thank you from me as well. There's quite a few questions to get through, so I want to get right to them. But I want to mention that I've arranged them in the sort of classic wysiwyg workflow, starting with the welcome screen and ending with the shaded view, more or less. So without any further ado, let's get right to the first question. The first question was explain the use of templates and what information is included in them. In essence, templates work in wysiwyg the same as they do in any other software. To answer the question about what's included in them, anything that can be saved in a wysiwyg file, so in a .wig file, WYG, can be saved in a template file, which is a WYT file for templates. Okay. The uses are varied and many. You can create a template file that holds certain document options, that holds shortcuts to fixtures and truss and any other common things that you use. You can create additional DMX universes beyond the 4 that are supplied with any new wig file. You can set up the sort of overall look of all your paperwork, so reports, layouts, and so on, as per your company standards. You can remove reports that you know that you will never need, so you don't have to remove them in your wig files, in every wig file that you create. You can create new reports that are not there. You can add consoles and protocols in live mode, and you can pre-bind universes that you created to their outputs. These are just some of the uses of templates. Again, the way they work is that anything that you save in a template file will be used as the starting point of any new file, any new wig file that you start from that template file. So to show you how this works, we will start with a new file that I'm going to create from the welcome screen by clicking the new button. Okay, and let's say that I want in all my files to have a black box venue. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm just going to accept the defaults. So I now have a venue in my file. I can also shortcut certain or any fixtures that I use commonly. This is probably not one that you use commonly, but I will create a shortcut for it. I will also create a shortcut to a piece of truss. So let's say this one, just choosing something randomly. There's my shortcut for my truss. Okay. Again, any changes that I make to my file will be saved in the template, and then will be used in any new wig file that starts from that template. So how do I do that? To save a template file, there's two things that you need to do. So first of all, you have to select Save As, okay? And the file as type should be set to wysiwyg template file WYT, again, T for template, okay? You can save template files anywhere you like, but if you want them to show up on the in the template area of the welcome screen, then in the wysiwyg files folder within your documents folder, go to the template files folder, and then go to the WYT files folder. Okay. Once I save a file in here, my template file in here, so call it Dany's template. Okay, and I hit save. Again, I make sure that I have a WYT file selected. Okay, now I have a template file. If I close this file now, on the welcome screen, I see here in the templates area that I can select to start from this file. Okay, so if I click on it, a new wysiwyg file will open that starts at the point where this template file sort of left off, okay? And I know that this is a new file because if I look in my title bar here, my application title bar, I see that this is an untitled document, okay? So now that I have my starting, this is my starting point. So if this is a truss that I use commonly in my files, I don't have to look for it in my library, for example. I just pick it up and I insert it, and away I go. Okay. Obviously, when I save this file, it's going to by default save as a wysiwyg file. That's a given. I'm not going to save this because there's no point. The last thing I wanted to mention is that if I ever wanted to edit a template file, I have to specifically open it as that. So from the file menu, I select open, and from the file type, I select WYT files. Navigate if I need to the location where the file is located. Hit open, and this starts me editing my my template file. Okay. When I save this, when I simply hit save, because I open the WYT file, it will continue to save as a WYT file. So do be aware of that. Before I end this answer, there's more information about templates in the wysiwyg reference guide. And I also wrote an article about using templates, which you will find in the tech resources area of our website. This is the main page of our website. If you go to resources and then select tech resources, okay, and you can simply search for templates, hit enter, and the first article that comes up using templates in wysiwyg. Sorry, this was obviously written a while ago. Everything works exactly the same, but you can go through here through this article, read through to get more ideas for how to use them, what are some common things that you might want to put in there, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Danny. Hello, everyone. We just had a bit of a glitch in the beginning here. We were talking, but I think we did a bit of an intro welcoming everyone, but I think it just doesn't look like it was being broadcasted at the moment. So uh, we just don't want to sound rude. So Danny is taking a quick pause. I just want to go through a couple things before he continues. So basically, what we were saying in the beginning that did not get through to you is that, well, first of all, it's really good to see a lot of names here that we already know. Thank you all for joining. And so for this webinar, the content is, of course, driven by you and now the questions that you previously submitted. And the number of questions were quite reasonable. We think we can cover, if not all, maybe 90% of them. Um, and we just decided that we will try to cover as many questions as possible. And Danny did a great job preparing a lot of the files, a lot of the assets that he's going to use, so we can go through those questions a bit faster. And if you feel that the explanation is a bit too fast, do remember the webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to always go back and watch it at your own time and at your own pace as well. So that's always good. And even though the webinar does allow open mic, we will mute everybody for now until Danny goes through all the answers. And hopefully at the end, we can take some live questions as well. I see already some questions arriving. There is the question feature there on your panel. So feel free to use that. And here on this end, we have Igor, myself, the marketing manager, Dino Massa, and Nick Law. And we will be going through some of these questions. If there's anything that we can fit in at the end, depending on the time left and the answer, if it's not too long, we can definitely address them now. And we can always address them by email as well. So we make sure that everybody is has that burning question that you have answered. So yeah, so please feel free to submit those. And now I don't want to take much time here, so I will just pass it back to Danny. And Danny, once again, back to you, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Igor. All right, so the second question was a bit of a basic one, actually, but it's always good to review the basics. And it was what are snaps and how are they used? So snaps are essentially drawing aids that help you draw more accurately by allowing you to start, or in some cases end, a draw operation at a precise location on an object that already exists in your drawing. Okay, they work like magnets. You will see in a second. What I mean by that is that as you hover your cursor close to the point or the point type that's selected for the snap, you will see your crosshairs and any object that's attached to the cursor jump to that point. Okay, which means that you will actually be able to place that object accurately or start that drawing command accurately at that precise location. Okay. Snaps can be enabled either before starting a drawing command or in the middle of one. Okay. If enabled before, they will stay until they're turned off. If enabled in the middle, they will turn off right after the next click. Okay. Before I start to show snaps, I should also mention that they're also useful for other operations such as moving or sometimes even rotation. Okay, so they can be used in multiple ways. The way I will show them to you today is with drawing. Okay. I obviously there are many snaps in wysiwyg. They're all located on the CAD options toolbar. Okay. I will not have time to go through all of them. So I will demonstrate with what's probably the most commonly used one, and that is Endpoint Snap. Okay. Um, this one essentially allows you to snap to the endpoints of a line, a pipe, a truss, or literally any object that has what we've considered an end. This could mean the tip of a cone, the corner of a surface, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what I've done is I've started a new file, and I'm going to start by simply drawing a line, just freehand, hit enter to finish drawing it. Okay, and the next thing that I want to do is I want to draw a rectangle, but I want to place it so that its corner from which I'm placing it is at the exact endpoint of this line. So how do I do that? I activate my rectangle drawing tool, simply accept the defaults for the purpose of this exercise. And now the rectangle is on my cursor. Um, Without endpoint snap, I would have to fidget with it and I will probably not get it right anyway. So I'm going to enable my endpoint snap. And now as I approach that endpoint, you can see that the crosshairs and the object sort of jump off from where the cursor is and snap or attach to the endpoint of that line. Okay, this is what I mean by, but this is what I meant earlier by a magnet. Okay, that they work like magnets. So once that happened, once that jump happens, I can click to place my object, and there it is now. The corner of that rectangle is at the exact endpoint of that line. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, because I turned on my endpoint snap in the middle of my command, so while I was essentially drawing this rectangle, you can see that even though I turned it on, it is now off. The orange outline around the endpoint snap icon is off. It's not there anymore. Okay. So just to show you this again, I'm going to place an object in my file. So I'm just going to pick one of the mannequins. Okay, and again, I want to place it at this end of the line. So what I do is I enable endpoint snap. Again, I go close to the endpoint of that line. You can see how it jumps off the cursor, how the object jumps off the cursor. And as soon as that's done, I can now click and the object is now at the very, very end of that line. Okay, just gonna hit enter to finish my insertion. Now, it's all good and fine to enable endpoint snap every time you need it, but for some operations, that's not what you want to do because you're going to be doing a lot of extra clicking. Okay, one example of that is when you're drawing dimensions. Dimensions, you should always draw, or in 99.9% of cases, you should always draw with snaps, okay, because you want to be as accurate as possible in your measurements, right? So if I'm to draw a dimension, I'm going to enable my endpoint snap first, okay? And I activate my dimension tool, click OK to accept the defaults. And what I want to do now is I want to dimension my my rectangle here from this corner to this corner. I want to see what the distance is between those two corners. So again, I've activated my endpoint snap before I started the command, and now I click for my first point of my dimension line. But again, because I activated my endpoint snap before I started the command, you can see that endpoint snap is still enabled. So I can now click my other corner and for the endpoint once the endpoint snap occurred, and there's my dimension line showing the exact distance between the exact corners of my rectangle. Okay. If I'm done drawing dimensions, I can turn off my endpoint snap. If I have to draw more, I would probably keep it on. Okay. I do encourage you to read through the reference guide to get more information about snaps and how they can be useful. This is also a topic that's covered in our advanced CAD training. So if you have any interest in that, you can probably sign up for a training session where you'll find out a lot more about them. Okay. The next question that came in was how to create a venue with a round floor that's lower than the rest of the floor. In other words, how do you create what would be known as a sunken dance floor, or even something as simple as a pool? Okay, this is a fairly specific procedure. There's a couple of ways to go about it. So I'm going to start, I'm just going to show you how to do it. Okay, so I'll start by deleting everything that I've created so far because I don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to switch to my quad view because it's easier to work in quad view for this. Okay. The easiest way to go about doing this is by starting off with a riser, which will represent our floor. Okay, a surface that's been extruded works just as well. This can also be done by simply using a surface, but the procedure is a lot more complicated. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that because at the end of the procedure that I am going to show you, we will end up with just a surface with a sunken floor or a pool. Okay, so let's see how that's done. So I'm going to start by drawing a riser. Okay, and we'll make it 40 feet by 40 feet by 4 feet tall. Okay, and I'm just going to click anywhere to place it. Okay, the requirement from the question was that this pool would be round, so I'm going to draw, next I'm going to draw a cylinder. Okay, I want the cylinder to have the dimensions of my pool. So I just picked these dimensions randomly. I'm going to make it 8 feet across horizontally, 6 feet across vertically, and I'm going to give it a height of 4 feet. Okay. We'll assume that the pool needs to appear in the middle of this space. So I'm just going to click to place it randomly. The trick to doing this, to creating this object, is to use the Boolean subtract operation, which is found in our tools menu, and you will see it in a second. However, there's one thing that you need to do in order for the Boolean operation to operate properly, and that is to slightly raise the cylinder that you drew so that it's just a little bit above the top face of the rectangle of the riser that you inserted. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can select my riser. Okay, and then from the tools menu, I select Boolean operations, subtract. WYSIWYG now asks me to select which object I'd like to subtract. So basically, the object that's going to create my pool, which is my cylinder. So I select that, I hit enter, and there is now my riser with my hole in it. Okay. You can see that the hole appears sort of jagged around the edges. That's because I left the cylinder in its default of 16 segments. Okay, if you want the hole to appear smoother, you can change that default when you create the cylinder. I'm just going to show you this now, but not going to actually do it by unchecking the use defaults option here and then changing that number. Okay, the maximum number of segments for cylinders is 40. Okay. So as I was saying earlier, this may be what you need. In which case you're done. But if you do need just a simple surface with that pool showing in it, or that sunken dance floor shown in it, what you can do is you can break the object apart, cut out the parts that you don't need, and then reconsolidate it. So the way to do that is to go to the the tools menu. So select the object and then use the break solids into surfaces operation to basically break this solid object into all of its component surfaces. Okay. Once you've done that, you can select the parts that you don't need. So for that, I'm going to do a drag selection from right to left. And this selects essentially the sides of my riser and the bottom of my riser, and I'm going to delete those. Okay. What we're left with now is all the component surfaces of this object. But the problem is, of course, that if I click on that side, I will only select that one particular surface. So what I want to do is I want to select everything that remains, go to the tools menu, and then consolidate my mesh. Okay, and now this once again becomes a solid object, and that's essentially the answer to the question here, which was how to create a venue with a round floor that's lower than the rest of the floor. So after this, you can probably build your walls for your venue and continue with your file. Okay. The next question is one that we get fairly commonly or fairly often in tech support, and it is why do some things when I copy and paste them, they end up pasting at different heights? Okay, great question. As I said, it does come up very often. So I'm going to demonstrate why that is. But before that, I will tell you that it is because of the missing coordinate. And if you don't want that to happen, you can enable ortho so that objects are pasted at the height at which they existed when you copied them. Okay, so let me show you how that works. I'm going to delete this object because I no longer need it. Okay, and just to have a frame of reference, I'm going to insert a venue, just the black box, default black box venue into my file. Okay, and I'm simply going to draw a cone, okay, and just place it anywhere. Now, let's say that at this point in my drawing, for whatever reason, irrelevant, I have to change my missing coordinate to 5 feet. So I'm going to hit my tab key, enter 5 for my missing coordinate, and click OK. If I now select this cone and I copy it with Control C and paste it with Control V, I can see in my side view and in my front view here that it pastes, it's going to be pasted at 5 feet. Again, that's because my missing coordinate is 5 feet. I just said it, okay? You can always check what your missing coordinate is by looking in this area of the wysiwyg status bar. So MC, missing coordinate, in this case, Z, because I'm working in a plan view, and it's 5 feet, which is what I set it to. So when I click, now my object inserts at 5 feet, okay? Even though it started at 0 feet, okay? If I take the new copy of the object and I copy and paste it again, it will continue to insert at 5 feet or to paste at 5 feet because, again, I haven't changed my missing coordinate. However, if I now change my coordinate for whatever reason to 8 feet, and I take my original object, which was placed on the floor, what's going to happen? I copy, I paste it, and it's going to insert at 8 feet. As you can see, it's higher than the other two that I pasted. Okay. If I take one of the copies, which was pasted at 5 feet, and I copy and paste it, it will also paste at 8 feet because my missing coordinate is now 8 feet. Okay. If I want to avoid this, all I have to do, and I want the objects to paste at the height at which they exist when I copied them, all I have to do is hit my F8 key to enable my ortho, okay? And now if I take the original object and I copy and paste it, as you can see, it will paste at that height, at the original height. If I take the one that was pasted at 5 feet, copy and paste it, it will continue to paste at 5 feet, again, because ortho is enabled, so the missing coordinate in this case is ignored. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. All right. Um, Another fairly common question, although it's a little bit wordy, so I'll just read it out and then I'll give you the answer. Our set designer uses uses a different CAD program. When I import DWGs of his design, there are often lines inside the geometry. I presume this is due to the difference in how geometry is interpreted between his CAD program and wysiwyg. Is there any way to avoid importing these lines or a way in wysiwyg to remove them? Um, you're right, it is the difference between how wysiwyg interprets the geometry of the object of the model differently than the other CAD program. Unfortunately, there is no way to do this at this time. However, it is something that we are looking into, and it is something that we are hoping to be able to do in the near future. Okay. So not much more to say to that. All right. Next question. What is the best way to have custom gobo and color wheels transfer with a file from one computer to another? Okay. Before I jump into the answer, I should explain what custom color and gobo wheels are. Okay. I do need to open one of my files. In order to show you this, so that I prepared. This file will be available for you guys if you want it after the webinar. I don't need to save changes here. So while this file is opening, I'm going to explain. So basically, custom color and gobo wheels are wysiwyg's way to handle modifications to moving lights, stock color, and gobo wheels. So for example, if your show requires the client's logo to be projected on the walls and flying around as the guests are coming in or anything like that, you would use this feature to simulate that gobo. Okay. The way that's done is the function is accessed from the library menu by selecting Edit Color and Gobo Lists. Okay. The procedure for how to create a custom wheel is described in the reference guide. So please go there to see how to do it. Okay, I've already created a custom gobo wheel for my VL3500s in this file, and the way it's different is that I actually have. Sorry for the poor image, but that's my logo. It's just called custom gobo. It's just an image of custom gobo. Okay, so that's my custom gobo wheel. The other gobos in this wheel are the stock gobos for VL3500. Okay, the last one is the one that I need for my client, for my show. All right. Um, so there's two parts to using a custom color or gobo wheel in a fixture. So first you have to create that wheel, okay, which again is explained in the reference guide. And second, you actually have to insert it into the fixtures or fixtures that where you want to use it. So to do that, you select the fixture, access its properties, go to the fixture tab, and then go to the wheel, or sorry, to the gobo wheel that's supposed to hold this custom wheel, or to have this custom wheel applied to it, and simply select it from the list dropdown. Okay. Um, Now to go back to the question, okay. Once a custom color or gobo wheel is in a file, it will simply travel with that file. Okay. However, it will only ever exist in the file. Unlike a custom gobo, which you can actually save at the application level so you can use in other files, this is just not something that we've had a chance to do that with. Okay. So you have to use a special trick to get, if you don't want to have to recreate these custom color gobo lists, you can transfer them between files with the trick that I'm about to show you. And that involves essentially saving one of the fixtures to which you applied this custom gobo wheel as a separate file, and then merging that file into any new file where you need this custom gobo wheel. So what I've done is I've selected the fixture and its hang structure, because as we know, in order for a fixture to exist in a wysiwyg file, it has to be hung on a hang structure, or it has to be inserted on the floor. In this case, I don't have any floor fixtures, so I have to select my fixture and its hang structure. From the file menu, I select save as. Then I select the selected object option, and I can just simply use the 000 as the base point. Click OK, and call this one custom gobo wheel VL 3500. Hit save. Now I need to use this gobo wheel in a new file. So I'm going to start a new file. I'm not going to save my changes here. And as I said earlier, now I need to merge my the file that I just saved into this new file. Okay, so for that I go to the file menu, select merge, choose the file that I just saved, hit open. Okay, I can just place it anywhere. So once my import is complete, I can now click to save, to place that object. Okay, I don't even need to actually keep it, so I'm going to delete it because I'm not going to actually use this particular object. I might, but for this exercise, I'm not going to use it in this file. So I'm going to hit delete. Okay, so select and delete it. If I go to the library menu and I select edit color gobo lists, I can see that the wheel just came across because of the merge. Okay, and if I were to insert a pipe and hang a VL 3500 on it, the spot, of course. Oops. I can now access this fixture's properties. And if I go to the fixture tab, and again, the gobo tab, the gobo one tab, I can now select this this custom gobo list that I just that I brought across from my other file to be used in this file. Excuse me. Next question, is it possible to make a line glow with light emission? Yes and no, okay? Any object, as you guys know this, any object, including lines, can be made to emit light in shaded views. I'm going to show you that very quickly in just 1 second. But they will not display the glow effect until R45. For R45, we are developing a feature whereby a light emitting line will actually glow. So we'll have a nice glow effect in the shaded view. However, that feature is not ready, so I cannot show you what it looks like. You will see it in R45 though. Okay, but just to go over very quickly how to make light emission happen, I'm just going to delete this object here because I don't need it anymore. Draw a line. There's my line. Access its properties. Go to the light emission tab. Enable light emission. Choose a color. Let's say green. Okay, and when I hit apply, you can see that the line changes to a greenish color. And now it's a little bit faint because my intensity by default is 50. I can bump that up to 100, and now I can see it. I can see it even better. Okay. So that's it about light emission. Again, look for the glow feature in coming in the next version. Sorry, I said R45 earlier. I meant R44. We are on R43 now. The next question is a good segue from the previous question, and it's another one that gets asked fairly often in support, and that is, how do I make lines appear bigger in the shaded view? Okay, very simple. With a line drawn, go to its properties. I'm just going to disable light emission for this one because it no longer matters. Switch to the line tab. okay, and change the shading diameter of that line to however thick or however large you want it to be. So for example, I can make it 4 feet. That will give me a very, very thick line, okay? Or I can make it 2 inches, which is more equivalent to a pipe. Or I can make it literally any size that I want. So there's the answer to that. Next question. Probably one of the most common questions that we get in support when it comes to reflections is people ask, I enabled my reflections for some of my objects, but I don't see the reflections on all of them. Okay. Let me open the file that I prepared for this, and then I will explain. Basically, in order to conserve resources in the shaded view, we've had to limit the number of reflectors or reflective surfaces in any wig file to 10. Okay. And notice that I said surfaces, not objects. I'll explain what that means in a second. Okay, so let me switch to my shaded view here. Okay. As you can see in this file, I just have a simple black box venue, for which I've textured the walls so that you can actually see some reflections. And the first 2 objects that I added to the file were these 2 risers. Okay. Again, I said earlier, this is the reflections apply per surface, not per object. A riser, for example, has 6 sides. That means it has 6 surfaces. So if I have 2 risers, I have 12 surfaces in my file. Since the maximum is 10, as you can see here, okay, I spin around. The purple riser was the one that was first inserted into the file. So all its surfaces, all its sides are reflective. Okay, the green riser, however, because it was the second one that was inserted into the file, only the first 4 of its elements are reflective. So its right side and the bottom are not. Okay. What do I have to do if I want those to be reflective as well? I have to turn off reflection for something else in the file. So I'm going to hit my tab key to enable my shaded view selection. Select my purple riser, right click, go to its properties, and then from the appearance page, let's say I don't want it reflection for its back, nor do I want it reflection for its bottom. I'm going to disable the display reflection and shaded view option, click OK, and whoops, disable reflection, disable selection. And now you can see that both the bottom of the green riser and its right side are both reflecting the world around them. Okay. Most 3D objects will have multiple sides. Okay, so for example, a cylinder has 3 sides: the cylinder itself, plus the top, plus the bottom. That's 3 surfaces. So if you enable reflection for all 3 elements, that's 3 of your surfaces that are reflective. So you only have 7 reflectors left to use. Okay. A cone similarly will have the bottom and then the cone itself, so that's 2 surfaces. The only object that's special or that is an exception to this is a sphere. A sphere has a single surface, which is the entire sphere itself, and you can see that. I'm going to switch to my sphere scene here. Okay, and as you can see, I have 12 spheres in this file. If I select them all and access their properties, and then click the sphere element, I can see that all 12 of them have reflection enabled. Okay, but again, only the first 10 that were inserted, which is I basically inserted them from left to right, only the first 10 of them have reflection. The last 2 do not. So if I want those last 2 to have reflection, then I would have to select 2 other objects. So let's say those 2 spheres, go to their properties, disable reflection, And now, as soon as I've done that, the last two spheres are now reflective. Okay. So the thing to take away from this is that to remember that reflection is per surface, not per object. Okay. Next question. Never really heard this one before, but I thought it was interesting, so I will answer it. Why do the pop-up frames have a number, and how can it be used? The truth is that number cannot be used in any way. It is simply a counter to know how many times you opened or how many pop-up frames you ever opened in this file since it started. Okay. So to open a pop-up, I'm sure everybody knows this, but you right-click in any view and you select Open in Pop-up Frame. As you can see here, the number in the title bar is 2. This simply indicates that this is the second pop-up that I've ever opened in this file. Okay. Again, that number is simply a counter, and it cannot be used in any way. Okay. How do I export the 360 panorama images? Well, very simple. You simply do an image export, and then you take your image into a 360 viewer, and that's really all there is to it. So what I've done is in the same file, I actually created PanoCam, which is basically a camera that I've placed at virtually the center of my venue. Okay, so to export a 360 image, what I do is I right click and I select export to image. Okay, I enable my export panorama option. A spherical projection will give you a full 360 panorama. So when you click and drag in the viewer, as you will see in a second, you'll be able to click and drag up and down and side to side. Okay, if you export a cylindrical projection, which yes will make a smaller file, you will only be able to drag left and right in that panorama viewer. So I'm going to leave it on the default, which is spherical projection. Click OK, name my file. Let's call it Pano. Okay, and then to view the files, there's several apps that I'm not sure what they are, but I know there's apps that you can use to do this. However, you can do it directly in your browser. Okay, in your Chrome browser. If you look for a panorama viewer, just like I have here, okay, use the one called Panorama Viewer Google Chrome. So click on that; it will show up in the Chrome Web Store. Simply click Visit Website. Once the website loads, click the Choose File button. Okay. Choose your the image that you just exported, and once it's uploaded, you can now click and drag in your file so you can see your venue or whatever it is you have in your file in a 360 view. Okay. Again, this is I can drag up and down as well to see what's above and below me, or the position of the camera that I had. Because I exported a spherical image, if I exported a cylindrical, I would only be able to click and drag left and right. The next question, I don't really have anything to show you for this, so I'm just gonna answer it. The question was, how do I print multiple reports or layouts to a single PDF? This is not possible for the time being because the PDF function or the PDF library that we use does not allow for this. So you can only if you do need multiple reports to appear in a single PDF file, you will have to use a different or you will have to use a PDF application such as Adobe Acrobat or something like it that has the ability to take in to import or to open multiple PDFs and combine them into one. Okay. One thing, the only thing that or the only way in which WYSIWYG will help you with this is in reports. I don't have any fixtures in this file, so I can't actually show you what this means, but I'm sure you'll get it. You have the combined group options option for any report. So if your report has multiple tabs along the bottom, I'm not talking about the different presentation mode tabs, but different report tabs for each report. You can choose the combined group sheets option in the reports view option view options, and that will basically put all those multiple tabs into one tab, and then you can print that to a single PDF file. But that is the extent to which WYSIWYG will help you with this. Okay. The next question is probably the one that we get most often in tech support. It was also asked numerous times for this webinar. Excuse me. And that is file optimization for shaded view and live mode. Unfortunately, as you can see from the time, I will not have time to cover this in this webinar. It is a very large topic. It takes a lot of explanation, takes a lot of understanding of how WYSIWYG works. We will do a seminar or a webinar for this sometime in the near future, probably next year at some point at this point, where I will try to answer most of your questions about this. But I didn't want to sort of leave you guys high and dry, as it were. So I've put together a PDF file, very simple PDF file, which points you to the WYSIWYG file optimization resources that we have available on our website and on our forum. Okay. These were written quite a while ago, but everything within them, almost everything, I'll show you what doesn't apply, but almost everything in them applies. So I will simply ask you guys to read them, go through these resources, and if you have any questions, you can always email me once you've gone through them, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I will recommend that you start with the two mesh consolidation articles, which are listed last in this PDF. But the first one especially, so the first link here will show you, actually I'll click on it and open it. It starts by essentially describing how WYSIWYG shaded view engine works. Okay, and that is really the key to understanding optimization for WYSIWYG files. If you understand how what WYSIWYG shaded view engine needs to do, how it actually processes the information that you feed it from your file, essentially from what you draw, from what you place in your file, then you'll know how to make those objects, what to do with those objects, so that the shaded view engine has as an easy a time as possible to actually render those objects to the screen, and therefore get higher performance. Okay. So I'll leave you with that. In terms of these resources, go through them again. Read this one first, then proceed to the next one, and then look at the other ones as well. And if you have any questions, let me know. The last thing I will say about this is that for your when it doesn't come to client presentations, but for the files that you use for prequeuing, for pre-visualizing. If it doesn't need to be lit, this is the basic rule, if you will. If it doesn't need to be lit, it should not be in your file. Okay, simple as that. Common examples of this are, for example, the substructure of the stage. I've seen many files where the stage was drawn and all its supporting hardware was drawn beneath it. You're not lighting any of that hardware, so why have it in your file? Okay. Very similar, also very common, truss hardware. Okay. So bolts, nuts, rigging hardware, any of that stuff. It's so small. Like when you're looking at your show from the front of house position, you will not see the bolts and the nuts and whatever is might be in your file to actually that holds the truss together. It's irrelevant for your lighting, so don't have it in there. Okay. The other thing is to ensure that that certain objects in your file that can be represented with textures uh, do not need to be represented with geometry. Okay, so for example, why cut a rather complex shape of a window into a wall? Okay, which will generate a lot of geometry, as you saw earlier when I was showing you how to create the pool. Okay, when you can simply use an alpha texture to represent that same window. Light will go through that, as you know from our alpha textures feature. Okay, so you can put a beam of light through a solid wall that's been textured with an alpha texture. Okay, so keep that in mind. Last but not least, uh, try to use as simple an object as possible to represent what you need. As long as it gets the idea across, that's really all that you should have in your file. There was one file that came to me a number of years ago, which was basically a boxing ring, and the ropes, the 3 ropes on the 4 sides of the boxing ring. The objects, there were basically many cylinders, or maybe one cylinder that was super detailed. So there was over 1,000 polygons between those uh, what is it, 12 ropes that are around the boxing ring. Why have that when you can simply draw lines and increase their shading or their shading diameter, as I shown you earlier, and that's really all you need to see in the shaded view. So those are just some of the things that that I will leave you with. Again, I will do a webinar for that where I will talk way more about this at some point next year. Okay. We are almost out of time. I do have one other question, so I can keep going. Yeah, okay. So the last question was, how do I get nice renderings like the ones in the installer slideshow? Another popular one. Um, Another one that I unfortunately cannot answer now. Rendering is a broad topic. It basically requires me to go through the render wizard and essentially explain every option and what it does and so on. So there's obviously no time for that now, but it is something that I will cover again in a future webinar. Okay. Do I have time for? Okay, so there were one more. One more. Okay, let's do. Sorry.
Yeah, just go for one more, and then after
Okay.
that we'll take some questions that came in, and we'll
Yeah.
take it from there.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. So the last question that I had on my list was, I have accumulated several older versions of wysiwyg on my computer and would like to uninstall them. Are there any special instructions or things to avoid when doing so? Yes, there's nothing to avoid really, but the best way to go about this is to start with the earliest version that you had installed. So let's say you had R40, R41, R42, and now R43 installed. You no longer want R40 through R42 because, well, they're 32-bit, and R43 is 64-bit. So you want to get rid of them. Start with R40, then move to R41, then move to R42, and you're left with R43. That is the best. That is the best way to go about it. Okay. One thing I will say is that we do have the CAS software cleanup tool available. You should definitely not resort to using that tool for standard uninstalls. Okay, it is really only meant to be used when there's a problem with the installation or with the uninstallation of the software. So for whatever reason, let's say your computer shut down in the middle of the installation, you came back and wanted to install again, and Windows says, sorry, you already have this version installed. That's when you would use the cleanup tool to get rid of whatever the previous installation, the failed installation, put on your machine. And then you can install the software once more. Okay. The last thing I will say is that if you do choose to keep multiple versions of wysiwyg on your machine, it is never a good idea to simply double click on a file to open wysiwyg, because that file will open in the latest, not in the latest version that was installed, but in the version that was installed latest. Okay, so that means that if for some reason you installed R43, but then again for some reason you needed to install R42, if you created a file in R43 and then you double click on that file, it will attempt to open in R42 because R42 was the version that you last installed. Okay, and obviously the open will fail because the file is in R43 format, and it cannot open in R42. Okay. So that's the end of the questions that came in before the webinar, then that I've prepared answers for. So let's see what other questions came in while I was talking all this time. Sorry, I'm just gonna mute myself for 1 second.
Hey, thank you, Danny. Wow, that's a lot of information. I hope people were able to follow most of that. We are trying to be very democratic and answer as many questions as possible. Yeah, we do have a few more questions. Do you want to take a quick break and have a water? Tino and Nick are also in the room. Maybe they can also jump in at some of these questions. And by the way, just want to mention the files that Danny was using in the demonstration, during the explanation, as well as his PDF, was just sent. Let's see through the handout tool here. So I think you guys will be able to open that PDF. The second PDF actually has a download link at the bottom that you can download all the two files that then used in his webinar. And now let's just take a quick look here. We do have a lot of questions actually. Some of them are require a longer explanation, and some here would even require a file to be prepared or to make things easier. But we're just pre-selecting a few. Let's start here. The question one, this is a good one. It was asked by Nick Murray and Ben Williams. They had very similar questions, so let's just pack them into one. Oh, there you go. Is there a way to use the moving scenery tool in live mode? Any volunteer to answer that one while Danny's having a break? Or Danny, do you want to jump into that one? Up to you.
Sure. I'll just.
It's okay. So basically, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Okay.
So yes, it is. So sorry, it's not possible to use the moving scenery tool in live mode. It is meant to be only used in design mode. Okay, but you can move objects in live mode if you patch them to if you patch the axes or the frames that they're connected to a motion universe or to a DMX universe. Okay, so you can control if you have if you patch to a motion universe, then obviously you would need a motion control console to drive them. If you patch them to a DMX universe, then you can control them from virtually any lighting console. So I don't know, Dino, is there anything else you need to add to that, or I
I
think
think
that's
that's
all
all
there
there
is
is
to
to
it.
it.
Yeah, I think Danny's covered it exactly. The moving scenery designer tool was intended for design mode, just to give you the ability to move something with looks as you crossfade. But respecting the rules of live mode, to move something, you have to have a console. So as Danny said, attach to a frame or an axis, and then you can control it via your console. So I guess we'll ask the next question. Question 2 came in by Emiliano. Is there a way to get the shaded view locked in a specific aspect ratio?
All right.
So
So
yes,
yes, so
that
that
is
is
definitely possible. So what you can do is for any camera, you can set its aspect ratio from its properties. Once you set that aspect ratio, it pretty much stays the same. So in my demo file here, I have a camera called main. If I go to its properties by clicking the properties button on the toolbar, on the camera toolbar, I can enable the aspect ratio. So let's say I make it, let me make it something more obvious. So 3:2, for example, I hit apply, and now I can see that that's my aspect ratio because I have the pillar boxes on the sides of my shaded view. As long as I'm using this camera, let me switch to quad so you guys can see it moving in the wireframe as well. Sorry, I need to switch it to that camera. So, oh, there we go. Yeah, so this camera is now locked in that aspect ratio, and there's no unless you change that aspect ratio, it will always stay the same. You can always see what the aspect ratio is in the following the camera's name in the camera drop down on the camera toolbar.
Cool, Danny. Thank you. All right, so we're going a little bit over time, folks. I hope you don't mind. Yeah, we do have another question. This one from Mick Murray. Is it possible to change the snap position on a rectangle when moving it? For example, another corner of the rectangle.
Yeah, so as Danny previously showed the snap tools, instead of just using the endpoint snap when you were inserting the object, you can also, in your move command, enable the endpoint snap, therefore selecting a different corner of the rectangle to snap it onto the object.
I
I
can
can
actually
actually
show
show
you
you
guys
guys
this.
this.
So what Nick meant was that if I have a rectangle that I've drawn and I want to pick it up, and so if I want to simply move this rectangle, so I activate my sorry from the edit menu, I select move, and if I hit enter to pick it up by its insertion point, it will pick up from its original insertion point, and I can only move it from that insertion point. Okay. However, if I select it and move again, I can now activate Endpoint Snap, for example, to pick it up from this point and therefore move it from that point. In a very near future version of wysiwyg, we will make it possible to insert objects such as rectangles and risers from any of their corners, okay? At which point, so once that happens, the corner from which the object was inserted will become, obviously, its insertion point. So let's say, again, this is in a future version of the software, but the way it will work is that if this rectangle was inserted, I chose to insert it by this, by its upper right corner, when I go to move it, and I hit enter to pick it up by its insertion point, it won't pick up from the corner that you see now, but it will pick up from its other corner, which is from where it was inserted.
Nice. Thank you very much, Danny. And wow, thank you for preparing all of those files and all the information. And I think we covered quite a lot. Um, and for the folks listening, I just wanted to mention that wysiwyg training is something that we started to push very hard lately. Education is something that we're putting a lot of focus now and is only going to grow. We actually have Stuart Green as the director of education, as well as Nick as education and training support. They are ramping up and slowly shaping up this new education program that we're creating. The education program will be will have part of it specifically targeting universities and students, and then another part of it will be specifically for professionals. And if you have not seen it yet, on our website we have a training page, and we are posting dates for all the future trainings that are already being booked in Europe and as well as North America. But we also have a custom request form that you can fill and perhaps even request an online training. In the future, we want to get to a point that we might be able to schedule very quick online training sessions with users who wants to just spend 5 minutes figuring out how to do something in wysiwyg. We as we build this new department, we will actually get there, and I think that's going to be very valuable. But until then, keep an eye on the training page and where we're going next. And actually, I can tell you next we are going to be at LDI. LDI in Las Vegas this year. We are going to be at booth 903, right at the entrance of the Hall 1, right across from Starbucks, with a beautiful booth. And at LDI, we are also hosting, I think, 3 or 4 training sessions. Is that correct? Yeah. So I know Danny is going to be doing one on CAD. As well as Gino is doing one as well, and Stuart and Nick will also be doing wysiwyg training as well as BlackTracks. For you to register for those training sessions, it's simple. It's all part of the LDI registering process. And if you want to get a free pass for LDI as well, just keep an eye on our emails. We've been sharing free passes for the last few weeks, and there's a few more emails to be sent. So grab our code there and enjoy that on us. And now we are over time, and we are about to wrap up. So, but before, I just want to mention that at LDI, we besides wysiwyg, will also be showcasing a beautiful demo for BlackTracks. BlackTracks will be automating and driving lighting, media, spatial audio, robotic cameras, and for the first time, we will be showing at LDI live generated augmented reality content. It's really cool stuff. If you're not joining LDI or attending LDI, keep an eye on our social media channels. We will be posting videos and hopefully covering a lot of what's going on there. It should be fun. And we hope to see a lot of you there. We were just scrolling here and we saw a lot of names that it's already known to us, and we hope to be able to shake hands and have a quick chat at the trade show. And yeah, so just one second,
Hi, everyone. Just before we leave you, we've had a lot of stuff coming in from the users, which is really great to see. A lot of thank yous to Dany for doing a great job. He's answered a lot of the questions, so great job, Dany. And there's a few other questions that we did not get to. We are going a little bit over time here. We will review all the questions and we will get back to you via email. So, and I think we'll get the marketing team to post those questions online as well so everybody can see the answers. But yeah, it's been a great webinar today, and thank you, Dany, and everybody else. And I'll pass it back off to Igor.
Thank you, Gino, and good reminder. And yeah, I think that's all for us today. Keep an eye for the next webinar. Definitely the next webinar will be next year after all the trade shows. It's quite a crunch time for us, as you can imagine. We have new releases coming in December, LDI, and we already confirmed we will be at ISC 2020. We're still working on ProLight here. Not sure if we will attend, but ISC, it's already confirmed, all right? And thank you all again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.